Marjolein, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here, and especially because this whole Planet as a Stakeholder initiative started at Rabobank. And I mean, with all my buddies my sustainability buddies from Rabobank are here, so that is really cool. Not all of them, but many. Yeah, so I would like to start with a short introduction about how this all came about, and a bit about sustainable IT and about the learnings that that my Scrum teams and I learned at Rabobank in reducing our carbon footprint. And then after that, we'll do a short mini workshop in 3 rounds, and you can find it already there. There's the agenda. We're going to do a brainstorm about how can we reduce our CO2, our carbon footprint, and then how can we use the circle of influence, and how can we actually make small steps to get started. So how did this all start at Rabobank? I was a Scrum Master there, and I had 3 IT teams, and it was really funny because we at home had done a big project with 40 solar panels on our roof and a heat pump in the garden, and then I was like, okay, so we have this all covered now, but I still want to do something meaningful, and I was talking about it with one of my teams. And then I asked them, what is actually the carbon footprint of our IT landscape? And then they were like, what? They had never thought about it. It was just something that they were intrigued about. And then we decided to do a retrospective about it. And actually with the central question, what would we do differently if we considered Planet Earth as our stakeholder? And we started to do it with sustainable engineering principles that you also shared about for the Microsoft learnings. And then we found this was really far away from our batch show. We just didn't know anything about it, but we started to brainstorm about what can we do to reduce our energy usage. And then one of those teams said we could easily reduce 10% just by optimizing, just by decommissioning some legacy. And for me, that was the trigger. And I thought, then every Scrum team needs to have this conversation, right? And then, yeah, it started to grow a bit bigger in Rabobank, and I started to make a workshop out of this. And also Dominique helped me with it, and we worked together. Really, really cool. So that was how it all started. Okay. So, but if we talk about the carbon footprint of IT, I mean, we didn't know anything about it, so I dove into the topic, and what I found was that data centers use about 1 to 2% of global energy consumption, and if you take production and life cycle of devices into account, then it is about 4%. But the thing is that it is also going to rise, right? And especially now with AI. The forecast, and this is by the Harvard Business Review, is that in 2030 IT will consume 8% of global energy use, and in 2040, 14%. So, I mean, that is quite a big rise. So what will we do about that, right? And then also, I mean, if you compare it with aviation, let's see here. Then it is said that the carbon footprint of IT is larger than that of aviation. It was really a shock for me. And if you would compare the internet with countries, it would be the 7th on the list of largest polluters, comparable to South Africa. So, if we would want to align to the Paris Agreement, there is quite a gap to fill, because we must be climate neutral in 2050. And in order to achieve that goal, we need to at least halve our carbon emissions by 2030. So that is the gap that we have to bridge. And that is also what we are going to talk about later in the workshop. Me and my teams, we just started to learn about this, and we found this information on the web, and we were just like, okay, what are we going to do with this? And there were some really simple things. The thing is that we started to ask ourselves different questions. So we wouldn't ask ourselves anymore, how can we maximize our performance? How can we run uptimes of 99.99%? But we would ask ourselves, what does the customer need? Instead of how can we optimize everything? One of my teams there, they also asked themselves about availability of their applications, and they figured out that their applications didn't necessarily need to run outside of office hours. So they wrote a script, and then it shut down their applications after office hours and in the weekends. Then also about redundancy, we asked ourselves, okay, what redundancy measures do we really need? And how do we balance this against the environmental impact that our choices have? And then there was also this one team, they were like, about backups. Oh, how have we organized that? We have double backups. And they were like, oh, that is so unnecessary. And they just shut down one backup system. And then it was really that they started to look through this new lens, through the sustainability lens. And that made a huge difference, and especially when it came to waste. They had so many teams had so many environments running that they hardly used. They had servers running in their environment, and nobody ever looked at, well, why are they still running? I mean, do we still use them? And then many teams that just shut the waste down, and one of the teams reduced their carbon footprint by 45% over 8 to 9 months, which was really impressive and so cool. They also did a sustainability sprint. And what they also did is they integrated this way of thinking also into the way of working. Oh, I'll come to that. Oh, I'll go too quickly. Okay, so, but how do you get started with this? And this is also something that was very important for me. I mean, I was not a sustainability expert, neither were my teams. We just started the conversation, we just started doing it. So how do you get started and how do you raise awareness? By just asking new questions and by just starting the conversation, and maybe do a sustainability retrospective or workshop. And then ask these new questions about what do we need instead of what is like the full potential or maximized IT environment. And then identify the low-hanging fruit. And that is also where Agile and Scrum meet sustainability, right? I mean, within Scrum, in a retrospective, you always define the first steps for continuous improvement. How do we improve in the next sprint? And that is also what we started to do with this. We made it so small. We made sustainability, which is like a big, complex problem, right? We made it so small that we could really get a grip on it. So, and then just start with the first step. And I don't know if you know this picture, but I really love this. The first step is the hardest because this guy is just looking at the wall, right? He doesn't see the treasure. So he breaks it into smaller steps. He just makes the stairs longer, and then he can easily get to the treasure. So let's keep this in mind. And then what we also learned is that what I was just saying already, is that we can really integrate the planet into our way of working as a stakeholder. So you can add the planet as a stakeholder in your architecture principles. You can add it in your epic and user story templates. And then maybe sometimes it feels far-fetched and it feels like, yeah, but we really can't do anything about the planet now, but at least it makes you think every time. And it makes you aware of your impacts on the climate. So also very important to make the progress in sustainability visible. And that is also why I really loved in your presentation about what I saw in the Azure dashboard, these carbon emissions statistics, which is really, really cool. I love that Microsoft is doing that. And it will also make it so much easier, right, to get started with this. And then also something that really helped us is to make carbon footprint reduction a recurrent item in your sprint review. So we started with one team, we really started doing that. And they would just always tell the stakeholders about what they were doing about carbon footprint reduction, and the stakeholders became used to it. So it was also like a bit of a holy flag, what is that? Sorry? A snowball effect, yeah, exactly. So, okay, maybe this is a bit too big a picture to take you through, but this is about how can we embed sustainable IT in Scrum teams and really embed it into our way of working, but also in our awareness, right? So we can embed it in our roles as Scrum Master, Product Owner, developers, by like developers adhere to green coding principles, but also in our Scrum events. So in our roles, in our events, and then there's also things that we need from IT, right? So we need metrics. We also need a vision from the management, a vision that they help us with. But as long as we don't have that, within our Scrum teams we can do a lot. And this team that reduced like 45% carbon footprint, they didn't ask for permission, they just started to do it. So we are going to do the workshop now, and I don't know if you know this picture, this little bird. This is Harry. Harry is the upside down hanging bird, and he is a bit crazy because he sees the world through another perspective. And then there's these other birds that are sitting beside him, and they're intrigued. They are like, oh my God, what is Harry doing? And the other, they are just annoyed. But these two will be his early adapters. Right, so they will be the first birds that will also be hanging upside down, and then the rest will probably follow. So taking this new perspective may really feel sometimes that you are like this Harry, this crazy guy that is hanging upside down, but I would like to encourage you to all be Harrys for our planet. So, we are going to start our interactive part tonight with the following question, and that is, what is needed to halve your team's or your organization's carbon footprint by 2030?